Hello and welcome to this review of Enya's 8th studio album, Dark Sky Island. This is a album that was a long time coming for her. It took 4 years for her to write and record this album, but before that she took a 3-year break from music entirely. The first time she's really done so since she made into the music scene back in the 80s. And the long wait, I definitely feel, was necessary for her to take some time and reflect and work on herself and her life. And I think that it is indicative in the music and the sound and the sort of vague sense of returning back to where she originally started with her music. Before that, we had been left with And Winter Came, which was a winter-themed / Christmas-themed album in 2008. And I will say that for me, it felt like at that point she'd come to a point where she'd, released something she'd always wanted to release, which was a winter Christmas album. But it felt so far removed from the music that she was making back, with Watermark and her first few albums. And so I sense a return back now, and a return to sort of far more introspective and more abstract lyrics in terms of her lyricist, Roma Ryan, and of course her producer, Nicky Ryan. They work as a team. And so for this album, although it is not my favorite Enya album, as you can know, my favorite Enya album is The Memory of Trees, which I have made a review of already, which I will link in the description below. Dark Sky Island comes 20 years after that album, and it's a very interesting time and point in Enya's career where she's very seasoned and she's been away from music for so long. I mean, the last time she released an album, the internet was not nearly as big as it is now, and CDs, physical CDs, were actually still somewhat selling, though by that point, 2008, it was already kind of on the decline. So coming back in 2015 in the fall was just such a big surprise, and I cannot explain to you how happy it made me when all of a sudden we finally knew a new album was finally coming after 7 years. Because I wasn't necessarily waiting all those years for this new album, but the last few years it was definitely like we felt like it was time, and we didn't have any sort of, they're very secretive about their process, and since Enya doesn't do press or anything unless she's releasing a record, so it was very secretive. So it got me so excited, but wondering where she was going to go. And I love the theme of this album and the album cover. It's deep blues, it's the night sky, and it's the beautiful stars that you can see on a dark sky island. This island was inspired by the islands of Sark, which were designated recently, I think in 2012, as a dark sky island or a dark sky area, which means that there is no light pollution whatsoever permitted. And the only way that you can get to these islands is by boat, and then there's no cars that are allowed, so you cannot see by, the headlights or anything. There's just no light pollution whatsoever. And there are several of these islands in the world, and the night sky, as Enya put it, she never actually visited this island, but she heard stories about it, and she wants to visit. But she said at the time she had never actually been, which was a little surprising, that the night sky is almost unrecognizable when you can see so many stars. I mean, I was out in the deserts of Moab, Utah. It was probably the one area where I was that had the least amount of light pollution and the least amount of, trees. So you really just had like you felt like you were under like a dome of stars. And I did see the Milky Way, and it's one of those things I'll never forget because it was just so miraculous and so unrecognizable to some extent, because you just don't realize how many stars are up there. And it truly touches you and makes you really feel so small, but you feel this connection to everything. It's an indescribable feeling. And this album, she's going for that feeling. And so I was very happy to see this theme and to see how she used the music to portray this theme in very classical style of her music, still feeling a little bit new and a little bit different from anything she's ever done before. So without further ado, let me jump into the first track here called The Humming. This track was inspired by this sort of almost Neil deGrasse Tyson sort of idea of how sound was the first thing that came into the universe, and how there was actually a specific, scientists have sort of mapped out a specific chord progression or note sound that could have been heard and audible, if possible, as the first sound in the universe. I don't know if that's making any sense or if I'm saying it right, but that's what I heard. And this song was inspired by that idea. So the which is very much similar to the humming that she did in her song Boadicea from the Celts. I like that sort of throwback. Is such a classic Enya song, and that it has this rhythm and this pump to it, and it's so doused in mysterious lyrics and very esoteric and imagery. and it's about the beginning and the ends of cycles of time, of the universe, of the planet. It's a cosmic opener to this album. And I remember when we heard the snippet of this song from their website, when before we heard anything else, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this has my heart pumping. I'm just so excited. It was like a 15-second snippet, and it was just enough to just tie me over for like a month before the album actually started to roll out. And so for me, the humming is a highlight track for sure. And all the light will be, and all the future prophecy, and all the waves, the sea, and on the road are you and me. Album, one thing I have to notice, this is rare for her in that every single album of hers that she has ever done has been an instrumental track, or at least a track with no lyrics spoken. And for her to start an album in such a chorus driven way was a little surprising to me, to be honest. I was expecting a slow piano ballad or a bombastic instrumental orchestral atmospheric piece. And the fact that she just kept things sort of kind of like a single, like at the very front of the album, like a single worthy track, is a departure for her and her style. I'm okay with it, but I felt like I just had to notate that because this is unique for her to not start on a song that is just an instrumental. And believe it or not, this album actually has no piano instrumentals whatsoever. It does have instrumental tracks with no lyrics. They have sounds, her making sounds with her voice and vocalizations, but they're more production heavy than the simple piano ballads that she would always employ on every single one of her albums up to date. And so the fact that that's missing, I will admit, is one tiny thing I really do find a flaw about this record, is that I feel like so many of the songs are too built up and layered, and there aren't as many songs that are just simple piano ballads. I mean, at least one song, because that was always a staple of her music, and I was looking forward to hearing that again, because they were so reflective and melancholy. So that's one thing that I do miss about this, that's in this record, is that it's not there, and I do feel its absence. Moving on to the second track, So I Could Find My Way. This song is a very melancholy and touching song that was written about her mother, who passed away while this album was being written. You can tell that this deeply affected her, and it makes me think, about just anyone who loses a parent. Hopefully they're at a stage where they're Enya's age and their parent was quite elderly and it wasn't like an unfortunate situation where they lost their parents at a young age, but even then, it makes me think about when my mother does go, just how thankful I will be for her and her inspiration and the life, obviously, that she gave me, but also, just all of the wonder and amazement that is a mother's touch in a child, and just the unforgettable bond between the two. And Enya sentiments this beautifully in this song. 1,000 dreams you gave to me, you held me high. It really brought a tear to my eye the first time I heard it. It still does. It's such a beautiful song with a very beautiful sort of choral intro into the track. It's simple, but it's elegant, and it's exactly what you would expect from an Enya song in a mourning or a lamenting sort of fashion. The following song is called Even in the Shadows. Now, this is an interesting song for Enya because it is a departure from almost anything she's ever done before, and it's one of the more, I don't want to say experimental, but it's one of the more pop-friendly songs that she has done. It has a very pulsating orchestral hook, and it's very, the theme of it is something you would hear in a lot of pop songs about love and loss and relationships. It's a little bit different for her. She's courted with that territory on recent albums in this century, but it's definitely something new for her. And although I have to be honest, it's not necessarily my favorite song. I think it's a little repetitive, which is an issue that does come up in a lot of Enya's more recent music, is that there is a repetitive nature to a lot of her songs, or that some of her songs sound the same. This song doesn't necessarily sound like any other song on the album, or any other song she's recorded for that matter, but it does get a little repetitive to me, so it's not my favorite song on the album. And if I had to listen through it straight through, it's probably the one skippable track, though I would not skip it. But, if I had to pick one. But it does not a disservice to the song. It's still a really beautiful sentiment. It's a very hopeful song, and she has to have something hopeful after such a, such a downing song of So I Could Find My Way, of reminding you of loss. This is, reminding you of, it's dealing with loss, and it's dealing with a relationship that's not going anywhere, but it's got a hopeful glint in its eye. The following song we come to is called The Forge of the Angels. Now, when I heard this title, I was very interested, and then I found it was an instrumental. I was really interested. I thought that this song was going to sound exactly like how it did. This song literally sounds like a forge of magic. All of these, Nicky Ryan really goes with all these different instrumentals and all these backings, and then the way her voice is looped over and around, you just feel swept up in this, and it does feel kind of Tolkien, and it reminds me of the dwarves from the Hobbit films, but it also has a bit more of an esoteric sort of atmosphere to that. I mean, you don't think of dwarves as being necessarily very spiritual or angelic beings by any means, and the song is called The Forge of the Angels. She also does vaguely use lyrics in this song from her made-up Loxian language that she utilized in her Amaranthine album. So the fact that that's coming back 10 years after that album is full circle and so fascinating to me. I love that the idea is still so strong. You know, Roma came up with that language, and Enya just went with it, and she got inspired by the Tolkien Sindarin and Quenya languages for the elves to compose in Loxian to begin with. I really, really hate, and this is a very common thing that reviewers say of her music, she's so crazy, she even sings in some made-up crazy kooky language. Like, don't come at her for that. That just shows pure intellectualism at its finest, and pure music and composition coming first. You know, she makes this language for the sound of it, for the sound and beauty of the way the vowel sounds as she goes through these beautiful notes sound. It's so intellectual and so above so many artists. Oh my God, they could never. I really hate, it's a thing I've heard and read in a lot of reviews of her music, is that they, even if they're not necessarily dissing her, they do mention her. She's the crazy lady who even sings in a made up language. I'm like, what is language anyway? Language is arbitrary. All language is made up. Like, get off your high horse there. Like, come on. She's above and on next level for doing this. And we should be looking to her for inspiration for that level of just creativity, because it's unfounded in her, in Roma and Nicky and Enya for coming up with this in Loxian. The next track was the first single released off of this album, called Echoes in Rain. I gotta be completely honest, you know, it was one of those songs, I had to love it because it was like a new Enya song, and we hadn't gotten a new Enya song in 7 years. So I was like, I'm gonna listen to this nonstop. I don't care. She could have released something completely horrible. I still would have probably loved it. It's how bad it was. But with time, you know, it's one of those songs I keep kind of going back and forth on. Sometimes I really like it. I think I really like this song when I have not heard it in a long time. I actually listened to it before this review, and I hadn't heard this song in a good 6 months. And I did feel the hopeful, joyous nature and tune, and it really got me feeling a certain way. But it is a song, like Even in the Shadows, where there's a repetitiveness nature to the chorus that actually gets a little bit annoying. And the Alleluia part is a little bit of I do have a little bit of a problem with it. And it's unfortunate because, you know, it's a song that was meant to carry the album as a lead single, and I do think it's a really nice added song to her catalog, but do I think it's necessarily strong on its own? It's a little tough. I do like the chorus a lot. I mean, the verses a lot more than the chorus. I think the verses are very strong. The lyrics are very strong. And it's, again, I mentioned this in my Memory of Trees review. I talked about how when they released this song, they talked about it as a bookend song to Orinoco Flow, and how I didn't really buy that because they were not even mentioning the song On My Way Home that came out 20 years prior, which actually sampled Orinoco Flow in it. And so Echoes in Rain, to me, it's definitely about continuing on in the journey. It's not about the end of the journey. It's about like a midway point. It's a midway point in the journey where Orinoco Flow is the start and On My Way Home is the end. And we're sort of reflecting and remembering that we got to keep going and be thankful for every new day. You know, that's what this song is to me. It is not the answer song necessarily to Orinoco Flow, unless you consider On My Way Home as the actual bookend. So that was just something, again, like they act like the Memory of Trees never happened if you talk to Enya, Nicky, and Roma. It's like the album never happened. It's just so hushed. But this is just sort of a middle song. And it's a middle song in the album, so it's sort of, it's not a song that's going to make you go, oh my God, but it's a song that needs to be there and helps carry the music forward. The next track slows things down and sees Enya going to a very traditional Irish ballad type song and lament in I Could Never Say Goodbye. Now, it might have been misled, but I thought this was a traditional Irish hymn. But I think it's sort of inspired by one, if I'm not mistaken, but it's not actually directly word for word. It's actually composed by Enya and Roma. So whether it is or not, I'm not really that familiar with Irish traditional music. It definitely feels like a traditional Irish ballad or lament. And it has all the familiar tropes of the songs that she once sung in Gaelic. Now, this is another interesting thing. Although this is not the first album of hers to not feature Gaelic, Amaranthine was. This, again, no Gaelic is featured in this record. Which, I mean, is not a bad or good thing. It's just a thing, and that's okay. But this song could have been sung in Gaelic, and it would have made it feel a little bit more traditional Irish. But of course, I do appreciate that you can understand the lyrics. It's a very heartbreaking song talking about loss and someone leaving in your life, whether it's the end of a relationship or a death. The next track is the highlight track for me, and it is the title track of this record, one that I thought was going to be an instrumental, because almost all of her title tracks are always instrumentals that she names the album after. But it is one of the most bombastic and yet it's esoteric, ethereal beauty, which is Dark Sky Island. The song starts so beautifully and softly and builds, and then she crescendos and decrescendos in her most layered sound on this record, where there's so much overlay, but it feels so cathedral-like and so orchestral in its sound. It just sweeps you away, and she's singing about the stars. Listen to the waves speak up, the blue voice of the sea. They whisper as they touch the shore, come back to me. And then she sings in the chorus, she names constellations in the sky, named in Latin, Capella Auriga, Eta Carinae, Sagittarius, Aquila, Alpha Centauri. The way she sings these constellations is just, I can't explain to you how beautiful it just sounds. You have to listen to the album. You have to hear what her voice does at one point in the bridge of this song, where she hits her lowest note that we have ever heard her sing. And it just is so sonorous and rich and deep and so goosebump inducing that you're just like, yes, this is what we needed to hear from this record, and this is what the 7-year wait was, we were waiting for. So this song is the point in the album where I'm really starting to pay more attention, and I'm really starting to get like, okay, this second half of the album, there's some really good gems here. So this song, do not sleep on it. It just builds and swells, and I cannot wait to be under a really full, rich night sky with no light pollution and listen to this song and just be swept up in the magic of it. The next song is the same sort of orchestral, huge oral surround sound vibe that you come to expect after Dark Sky Island, and it's called Sancta Maria. She just says that one phrase over and over, but in so many different chord changes and in so many different ways that you just feel surrounded by, like there's a million Enyas around you in a cathedral of sound. Very classic to songs that she's done in the past. It's not too churchy in the way that the Alleluias were on Echoes and Rain, for me, that I don't actually feel too much of a churchy vibe, but it's definitely in a waltz time signature, and it's in a waltzy sort of tune, so it's a dance track. I just imagine, but like a traditional dance track. I imagine like a really gorgeous ballet or a very traditional European dance being taken place to this song, and I'd love to dance to it in that way. It just makes you want to do traditional waltzes, and I love that. Oh, there's something about the way that song ends. It really brings it all together, and then she has all these different instruments in the background. So then we come to a really interesting and a really unique track on this record called Astra et Luna, which is very sparse and yet full of this sound and this pulsating orchestral backing. It's sung in Latin, and I'll read some of the lyrics here because they're very interesting. It's called The Stars and the Moon in Latin, Astra et Luna, and it says, the night sky in the darkness, the stars and the moon, no clouds, a clear sky, the great song of the wind. In the chorus, it's the beauty of the sea, the beauty of the earth, the beauty of the world around me. And then the open sea and summer, and a distant journey, a ship traveling by night. Now, she mentioned that a theme of this album was voyages across oceans in the middle of the beautiful dark sky with stars above. So this song beautifully encapsulates that feeling, and this feeling of being out in the ocean, of moving forward, hopefully to the new day, to the new horizon, and the beautiful North Star, the beautiful stars above guiding your way, and keeping this sense of wonder alive. It's such a hopeful song. All major sounding, all major key sounding, and just so pounding and rhythmic. And I love when she sings in Latin. It just has this regal vibe to it that, you know, makes her the literal queen of the universe. And then we come to the Loxian Gate. Boy, was I excited when I heard this title, because of course she is singing in all Loxian. She's just singing and chanting. It's an enchanting song. It's meant to be a chant. And it's tons of overlays and tons of pounding drums. I mean, boy, is this fun to dance to. Just like The River Sings was on Amaranth Times, one of my favorite songs from that record, just because of how pounding and tribal it felt. And this song really makes me think of like a, not so much a ship on the water, but almost like a spaceship entering a new planet atmosphere. It's like we're going in time and space to find a new land. And in a way, she did say the song was inspired by that. The Loxian people voyaging across the stars. And the Forge of the Angels is sort of them traveling. This is them speeding up and getting closer to a new world or a new planet. And it makes me really excited about the direction her music could be going in if she wants to go more in that aesthetic. This feels like it's building up to something big. And then the final track on the standard edition, Diamonds on the Water, closes out the album so beautifully. I love that she brings back that nice percussive sort of ticking sound that she's had in some of her music before. It just gives it such a relaxing sort of metronome-like feel. It keeps the rhythm. Listen to the river, it echoes softly, drifting in my memories, the sound of summer. And as she alludes to the diamonds on the water like they're falling from the sun. If you haven't seen a clear sunny day and the water clear blue with tons of these like diamonds of light shimmering on the surface, it's a beautiful sight to behold. And now every time I see that, I just think of this song. And it's so relaxing. It's the perfect song to listen to by the pool or by the ocean. And it's a little bit more kind of romantic, and it makes you want to be with someone and just sort of think hopefully about the new day. And it's definitely an evening song, like an evening prayer type thing. And I just love the soft, beautiful piano bridge that she employs, because it's the closest that she gets to doing sort of just any sort of soft piano work that she does on this album, because otherwise it's mostly absent. There isn't a lot of piano, and to be honest, the one time she uses piano in Echoes and Rain, I'm not a huge fan of. It's just a little too jumpy, although I like the hopeful tune of it. But the piano bridge or interlude in this song broke my heart. I mean, it is just so elegant and so gorgeous, and you have to listen to it. Just A+ for this song, A+, one of my favorites. Now, of course, I have to talk about the 3 deluxe tracks in this album. We've never gotten deluxe tracks on an Enya album before, so when I heard there was 14 songs instead of 11 on this album, I was very excited. So we have a song called Pale Grass Blue. Now, boy, did this song get shivers down my spine when I first heard it. It is so... I think Solace is before it, I can't remember, but I'm going to talk about Pale Glass Blue because the lyrics are so abstract, and I really believe it should have been featured on the standard edition. A silver hue on wings of blue as all around me shadows dance in light. Sun is high above and winds are still enough, and all I want to do is stay. And everywhere the blues are moving, in the air, I see them in their flight. Sun is high above and winds are still enough, and all I want to do is stay. So she's alluding to the feeling and sound of being in the wind and the air around you. And she uses blue as an object, like a bird flying around her. And so this song makes me think of like elementals or the elements. And it makes me think of just what beautiful winds really do feel like. Wind is always an element in her music and the themes of her lyrics. And this song just really sweeps you up. And I also think a bit of, well, I think of primeval nature, and I think of elementals in like the forest and sprites and fairies when I think of this song, because it has that way she delivers it, and the way it kind of waterfall like sound, it kind of chases after itself in the melody and chorus that really touches you and makes you feel like you're surrounded by all this warmth and these beings around you. And then, of course, there's that beautiful flute that she employs, which really broke my heart when I first heard it. I know so many things broke my heart when I first heard it on this record. I do love that flute. It's an allude to one of my favorite records, The Memory of Trees. This song belongs on that album, to be perfectly honest. And so it's one of the reasons why it's my favorite track, one of my favorite tracks on the record, after the title track, because it belongs totally on The Memory of Trees. The theme of it and the sound and the instruments. So that's like major plus, A+ for me there for you, Enya. Thank you for bringing that music back, because it's been 20 years since you've gone that experimental and that mythical in your music. So then we have 2 songs that I'm not exactly crazy about. They're a little bit slower and they're a little bit less to phone home about, in Solace and then Remember Your Smile. They're very nice, just sort of mid-tempo, if not low-tempo, just almost piano ballad-like songs, but not piano ballads. And Solace definitely touches on the heartstrings, and she's talking about why do you live alone, which is interesting because she's such a solitary person. Could one wonder if maybe she's singing this song about herself? I mean, all these years, she's now over 55 years old, and she's still been just by herself, single, unmarried, all this time just living in her castle writing this music. But does she get lonely? And that's something I always wonder, because I definitely empathize. I believe in living like that. I'm a lonely, solitary person myself. And so for me, I believe that solace is kind of her writing and reflecting back on herself and writing this, why do you walk this road when you could find your way home? It's a very bittersweet melody and sentiment that I think has her questioning sometimes, is this the right path for her? Although I know she knows that this is the path for her, because I believe it is, and I believe it's a path for me as well. And Remember Your Smile is just a beautiful, sort of more traditionally composed song where she's just reflecting on maybe a joyous love of her life past, or someone she knew in her family, and it's just a beautiful tribute to that person, whoever Smile that was. And it has an organ in it, which always makes it feel a little bit more traditional. So overall, Enya's Dark Sky Island was a return to form for me after 7 years of mystery and not knowing where she was going, or if she was going to even continue with music ever, which has always been a fear of mine. And of course, now we're coming to a year and a half since this album was released. And of course, we do know that no Enya album is going to come within at least 4 years of each other. So we've got a ways to go probably before, if we ever get a new Enya album. But it does have me curious to know where she could go next, because to me this album is a stepping stone in the right direction. It's not quite where I'd like to see her go back to in terms of being a lot more ethereal, a lot more folksy, a lot more sort of back to the wonder and this, childlike playfulness of her earlier music, with still that beautiful, austere Irish traditional aspect to it. But it's getting there, and it's so darn close. And I really hope that this is a signal for her returning back to this wondrous sort of land and soundscape that she employs for all this music that she channels down to us and blesses us with. So Dark Sky Island, one of my favorite albums of hers. As you know, Memory of Trees will always have a special place in my heart. But this might be my third favorite album of hers, after Shepherd Moons, and then, of course, after The Memory of Trees. So I would like to know what you thought in the comments about this wonderful, beautiful record, and of course, how excited you were when you finally found out it was coming, because it was just such a long wait, and where you think she might be going in the future, and if she will ever tour, because that's always been speculated. And every single time she releases an album these days, it's like, are you going to tour? And it's like, well, I am, but maybe not. We don't know. We're not going to give you a straight answer. So I would love to see some of these songs on tour. I feel like they're just so fitting for that. So maybe that will happen in the near future. Maybe. So thanks for watching. I plan on doing reviews of all of her other albums. Like I said, the Memory of Trees review is in the description box. You can click and watch that. And I will be doing the next one will be Watermark. I'll be going back to the beginning and going through the rest of her albums chronologically. Although I guess I could start with the Celts, but I might start with Watermark and then do the Celts, because I really want to talk about that album. So thanks for watching, and hope you have a splendid day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.